Empower Leadership Team. We've got Joe DeRing and Dan Jaskot. Joe DeRing is the founder of Empower. He founded that in 2009 in Connecticut. He's a U.S. Army veteran, and he is an enthusiast about leadership. And then we've got Dan, who joined the team with Empower from the very beginning and has a background in education and experiential learning. And these two guys are the founders of Empower Leadership, as well as the W.A.S. podcast. You guys want to say hi? Joe?
What's up, everybody? How we doing?
Go straight.
Doing great. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for doing this for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here today to talk about your podcast, the W.A.S. Sports Leadership Podcast. Do you guys have a background story of that? I feel like there's got to be something.
We definitely do. So W.A.S. stands for, it's short for When Athletes Shit in the Woods. All right, and pardon the language, but it's just to be upfront and real with everybody. When athletes shit in the woods. And it comes from an experience Joe and I had back in 2011. We had a group of high school football players. They were going to be seniors, come up to our, from Central Jersey, come up to our facility in Connecticut for a 24-hour, what we call the Ranger Sports Leadership Intensive Program, right? Okay. And this program was designed based on Joe's experience in the Army and then intertwining a lot of the experiential adventure training that I had experience in. And we had a group of young men for 24 hours straight. And they play the sport of football with both Joe and I both have played at the high school and a little bit at the college level. So we know very intense sport. So our whole purpose with this event was 12 hours of the hardest physical, social challenges that these athletes could ever imagine facing in this type of environment. And then after we kind of break them down for half of the program, we spend the next 12 hours building them up, still challenging them, but letting them know, like, hey, no matter what we throw at you, if you're able to do these things, if you're able to stick together, you're going to get through them and you're going to get to the finish line successfully. So we love the program. We had already worked with this team the year previous, had a great experience, got to know the coaching staff, got to know the dynamic of the group. So in this particular year, in our second year with this program, as soon as they arrive in their vans, right, there's this aura of stink, right? It was almost like they didn't want to come. It was almost like they were forced to come to this event. And Joe and I knew right out of the gate, like, goodness, this is gonna be a battle. This is gonna be a 24-hour struggle, right? So we're high energy. We get going just like we normally do. We go through our introductory part of the program, and we get the ball rolling, right? And within the first 45 minutes, about half of the group is just, God, what's next? When are we leaving? But there was this one athlete in particular that stuck out that was just resisting everything we were trying to do, everything we were trying to teach, not understanding the why behind what we were doing, even though it was really explained to them. So, make a long story short, we're grinding it out. Joe and I are working our tails off. Some of the athletes are working their tails off. Some of them just aren't quite getting it. And we're hitting road, speed bump after speed bump after speed bump. Finally, day one ends. And the last task of day one is like starting a fire from, using just flint and magnesium. And it's a grinder. It's a heck of a process. And we finally get to the finish line, get the athletes to their campsites, get them ready for not a ton of sleep, but enough sleep to recharge for day two. Once that's taken place, Joe and I find our spots for a quick nap, essentially, so we can just recharge the battery to like 25% for day two. So we get to bed, and it's got to be like 1:32 in the morning by the time we're able to get to sleep. And then about an hour in, I don't sleep very well in the outdoors. It's just kind of all this anxiety about getting ready for the next day. And, about an hour into the nap, I hear some rustling in the woods and really don't think anything of it, right? We had brought a porta potty down for the guys. Maybe they were getting water, more firewood, someone had to use the bathroom, or maybe it was just a little critter running around. So you kind of peek up and like, nothing going on, nothing major. Great, get through the night. Next day we wake up and they do campsite cleanup, and then Joe and the coaches take the athletes up to our staging area to start day two, while I just do a final accountability walkthrough of the campsites, making sure they're clean, making sure everything's good to go so we can get started with day 2. They passed the accountability check for about 95% with flying colors. The campsites are clean. There's not an ounce of garbage. There's not a plastic fork or knife on the ground anywhere. The fires are out. And I'm like, all right, we might have made the breakthrough. We might have hit it, right? We might have got through to them finally. And I'm completing the last leg of the walkthrough, and I'm walking through a trail in the forest here in Connecticut on our property. And I'm approaching where we had brought the porta potties down for these guys, and I see something in the middle of the trail. I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. Maybe something fell, maybe a sock fell out of somebody's bag on the walk up. And as I approach, I notice there's some toilet paper on top of an actual human shit in the middle of the trail, in the middle of our woods. And just the blood pressure through the roof, up this 100-yard hill that we have, and it's a brutal walk, and any day of the week, and I'm steaming up that, and I stop everything in its tracks at the pavilion area where we were staging, and I'm like, all right, we need to have a conversation. Someone did this in the woods, like 10 feet from the porta potty that we brought down for you. What's going on, right? Who's gonna own it? Accountability was a big piece of the thing. Who's gonna step up and say, you know what, I messed up, I did it, I'm gonna go take care of it. We presented that to them and had about 10 minutes of dead air. We had and then suddenly athletes started yelling at other athletes saying, whoever did it, go take care of it. To a point where the head coach, who is a tremendous individual, one of the best guys I've ever met over the past 11 years at Empower, he gets sick of the whole, place and blame and no one owning their mistake. And this moment is ingrained in my mind forever. He picks up a shovel, picks up a garbage bag, and then in the most defeated manner ever, head down, shoulders slouched, he heads down this 330-foot walk down this massive hill. He's down there for a couple of minutes, and then he heads right back up the hill with a full garbage bag and a dirty shovel in his hand. And at that moment, that was the uppercut. That was the unexpected blow to the solar plexus, as they say, that I didn't expect it. Joe didn't expect it. I'm pretty darn confident the coaches and most of the athletes didn't expect it. And we had a choice there. It was, do we just stop and quit, or do we forge forward and figure out a way to overcome this situation, which just happened to be a shit in the middle of the trail in the woods? So the W.A.S. stands for When Athletes Shit, and it's really, just the concept of, Joe and I went into this program with the best intentions, and I know the coach did, right? Coach, he's, again, a great guy. We woke up to a surprise. And this one was not a pleasant surprise. And as a group, we had to figure out a way to overcome that moment of adversity and still make the most out of the experience, to still deliver the product that we promised that we were going to deliver, and to still give the athletes and the coaches this start of year experience that we would hope would carry them into the season. Long story short, their season was, from a win-loss record, was they were 0-10 that, and a lot of the struggles that they had with us in the adventure environment kind of took shape in the on the football field throughout the year. So that's why we call it the W.A.S. Sports Leadership Background, Expect the Unexpected, and it's all about tying that concept into playing sport, coaching sport, being involved in leading any sort of outdoor adventure activities.
Yeah, no, and I got two things. It's well put together, that story, Dan, and it's exactly the way it happened as I remember it. The bag full of waste was absolutely like the mother of all metaphors for that group.
Yes.
And, they had some good kids in that group, but the negative leadership, the negative aura that surrounded that group was too much for that group to overcome. And it was that way their entire season. And for us, the leadership aspect is such an important part of life, of sport, of being successful at what we do. And we thought that the When Athletes Shit is a perfect example of not everybody on your team, on your staff, in your household is going to buy into your values and your principles and what you deem is an important way to communicate, to trust, and to collaborate. And so the leadership in getting those people who don't necessarily buy in is so hard, and it's a grind every single day to be able to influence the way people think, feel, and act so that you guys can be the best you can be. And that was a perfect example, and that's what this podcast is about, is trying to glean some of the different ways coaches and athletes and leaders are grinding, are appealing to some of those folks on their teams and in their offices and wherever they might be leading to come on board, to think the way we think so that we can be productive and synergize and really get after it, and not just give up and not succumb to the adversity, not to be this fair weather leader that can only do it when people are with you. And so When Athletes Shit was a good kind of illustration and characterization of the grind that is leadership, especially when not everybody on your team thinks and feels and acts the way you do.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting and funny in a cruel type of way story. Like, I feel awful for the coach and you guys to have to encounter that, but at the same time, like, I can't help but laugh.
He's recovered. I just had a good conversation with him a week ago. He's doing great.
Good. Perfect.
And we've had a lot of subsequent groups from that particular team come out, and they've run the gamut from championship level groups to groups that have struggled with their own adversity and their own character and have struggled on the field because of it. And so they're a really interesting dynamic because every group is different, so much different than the one previous. And so it's really fun to work with those guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, Joe, I think you touched on it a little bit just now, but, if we were to say in one sentence, what's the goal of this podcast for you guys?
Yeah, easy. It's to entertain while also providing insight and just a little look into the different ways people lead through challenge, adversity, fear, and how the grind of leadership, while it may not be Hollywood, while it may not be glitz and glamour, it is essential. Leadership matters, and the people who we have on the show understand that and help our audience understand that what they're doing out there, whether it's for a softball team or for a football team or for a corporate team, the way that the words they're using, the actions they're rewarding matter. And leadership is not glamorous. But the real part of it can really make a difference.
That's awesome.
We've kind of adopted the tagline. It's for those people that embrace the dirt and the grit, right? And it's not pretty. It's hard. You're sweaty and tired after leading. But as Joe stated, it's a critical part of success in anything. And it doesn't come because you snap your fingers. It comes from hard work, busting your tail, and doing everything that you can to positively influence those around you.
Yeah, and what it's not, Sarah, it's not one of these stuffy leadership experts telling you how you need to be as a leader. This particular podcast is not, a leadership guru telling you how to solve your personal problems and how to eat better, how to exercise better, how to manage your day better. We're not that product. We are simply a couple guys who have built a leadership business from nothing, who believe wholeheartedy in some essential leadership elements. And we bring those elements to every group and every experience we facilitate and provide for our guests at Empower and our groups at Empower. And we're just sharing some of the stories and some of the personalities that we've met along the way.
Yeah, we know there's a lot of those stories and personalities in there. So, with that, knowing that, what can a listener expect when tuning into the podcast? What could a guest on the show expect? Like, what are we looking at
absolutely.
Here?
It's important. We are shooting for entertainment value. We want people to listen to this on a walk or in their car or wherever they listen to podcasts and chuckle a little bit. We want them to have a smile on their face. We want them to feel like, oh, these guys get it. These guys get that it's not perfect. Leadership is anything but perfect. And we know that in terms of our own leadership, we have not been perfect. We have learned a lot along these last 11 years with building Empower to where we've gotten it to. And, we use the Brass Bonanza as our intro and outro. As Connecticut natives, the Brass Bonanza is iconic, a Hartford Whaler hockey team. We both grew up watching the Whalers, and anytime the Whalers would score, when they come out on the ice, the Brass Bonanza would play. And so that evokes a fun, happy, uplifting feeling in both Dan and I. And so that was a no-brainer to add to the production of the podcast. And then from there, we like to divide each of the segments or the podcast into segments. And so each segment is designed to take us down a different path, sometimes a little bit off the beaten path. Sometimes, we have a segment called In the Trenches, and we like to kick each of our episodes off within the trenches. And it generally focuses on current events and some of the leadership dynamics within that current event. And we explored a little bit. And, we use the Empower model of leadership to kind of break it down, and we involve our guest into that conversation as well to hear what him or her has to say. But that's one. We do a segment called Leader or Loser. And so we did one recently on The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan docu-series that kind of chronicled his 6 championships in 8 years. And we talked about some of the different personalities and the ways in which they made decisions and were portrayed on the docu-series. And we would then go around the horn and say, were they a leader or a loser? And so that was really interesting conversation and entertaining nonetheless. And so we like to use the segments to kind of, provide a theme, take us down a path and explore a topic. But we also do some interview style segments as well, where we try to dive into some of the different guests that we have and try to get them to help our audience understand their leadership style and why they've made some of the leadership decisions they've made.
Yeah, and to touch on that too, the interviews with the guests, first off, Joe and I are both sports people, so the In the Trenches part is something sport related, whether it's at the professional level and decisions that are being made or comments that are being made on social media by professional athletes, and really getting into those, and just it's an opportunity to talk shop and share our opinions about what's going on in sport. And then, we've also, focused on a little bit about the youth sport realm as well, whether it's, I know Joe does some coaching at the youth level, so to talk a little bit about some of the challenges with coaching in youth sport. So, the In the Trenches segment is really an opportunity just for us to talk sport, to talk shop. We both love it. We grew up playing sports since, Joe, I think, could skate before he could walk. So, let's be serious. And, my first book was like a coaching football book, back in the day. So we're sports guys. We love talking shop, but the interviews are awesome. Our guests are people that are out there doing it. They're not theorists. They're not people that you're going to see writing, research article after research article. They're people that are just in the field doing it. And, whether it's, talking with a coach to learn about what they're doing to connect with their athletes when a season's been canceled due to the COVID-19 situation, or to hear from an outdoor adventure leader who shares a journey from, writing a couple articles here and there to now being on TV. So really it's connecting with them and hearing from them, because our listeners are going to get such insight and inspiration, I think, from those people that are on, and just hearing some ideas. Like to hear a coach say, yeah, I tried this and it failed miserably, but I learned this from it, and now I'm doing this a lot better. And I think that's a great part of the episode there for the listeners, is just to hear from people that are actually out there doing it. They are authentic. They fail, right? They have their moments of triumph, and just like anybody else, if you're going to try something, you're going to have those moments of struggle, and you're going to hear from some people that are just doing a hell of a job, whether it be coaching, football at the high school level, or, leading, boating trips and fishing trips for, children. You're going to hear from people that are out there doing it and doing it well, and you're going to find out that, oh man, I thought this person was perfect And they're not. They fail just like us. And I think it's inspirational to hear those real stories, not just, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. It's, yep, I failed 15 times before I got one success, and I'm a better person because of it.
Is there anything else, Dan, that you would want someone to take away from this podcast? Like, I think you just touched on a couple different things there, but is there anything else that you didn't mention that you'd want to share?
Yeah, just from a leadership standpoint, and like I said, our guests are real. They are authentic. They're human beings. Joe and I, in these conversations, are flawed. We are human beings as well. So I think that's one thing, is they're not going to get fluff. They're going to get Joe for who he is. They're going to get Dan for who he is, and they're going to get the guest for who that guest is. And I think that's important. The second thing, and this goes into sport, but really I think bleeds into every element of our lives, is we hope to show help the listeners understand that there is only so much that is in our grasp of control, right? We can control how we prepare for things. We can control the effort we put forth in a situation. There are so many things outside of that bubble that are out of our control. And leadership in sport and leadership in life in general is really about finding the courage and the discipline to focus on the stuff that is in your control and not allow those outside distractors to get in the way of your success. And all of our guests have shared stories about, this thing could have stopped me. It was completely out of my control, but this is how I figured out a way to forge forward and get to where I wanted to get to. And then the last thing is, tying it back in. When I was walking through the trail near the porta potty back in 2011 and I saw a giant poop in the middle of the trail, I didn't expect that. It was a negative situation for me, not so much as it was a negative situation for the coach that had to go down there and clean it up. So often people look at these unexpected situations like, oh, here we go again. What am I going to do? And it's this negative connotation, right? Well, really, many of those unexpected situations turn into opportunities for us to get to where we want to get to, for us to fulfill our potential, for us to live out our passion and live out our dreams. And that's, I think, one of the biggest messages from this is like, it's unexpected. We didn't think we were going to have to make this tough decision, but if we just have a little bit of courage, a little bit of grit and mental toughness to look at it and say, it's going to be tough, but if I do it, I'm advancing who I am. I'm going to have an impact on people around me in a positive way. And it's going to help me fulfill whatever it is that I'm passionate about. Then, like Joe said earlier in the episode, when you recognize those opportunities, freaking get after it. And that's really what this podcast is all about, having the courage to just go out there and get after it.
Sarah, we provide the listeners with a lot of listening pleasure. I mean, just listening to Dan and listening to me, it's a wonder our guests get a word in edgewise. We have so much to say, but these guests have been awesome. We've had a youth softball coach that I coach with and former professional baseball player, John Bigu. We've had Misty Wells on, who is the producer and founder of Let's Take It Outside, an outdoor show on Fox Sports. We've had Greg Jaskot on, who is a high school football coach up in Connecticut. And we have a lot of other guests planned. And really, we're always open to the idea of being introduced to new guests and new sports and new realms. And so if you have any ideas out there, email us at joe@leadwithempower.com or dan@leadwithempower.com and let us know if you have somebody or if you yourself are interested. So would love to hear from any of the audience out there if they have some guests to bring on.
Awesome.
Without a doubt.
Well, if you've made it this far, thank you for staying tuned in and listening to these fine gentlemen ramble. We love them. But if you want to tune into the podcast, you can find it in the iTunes store in the podcast. You can also find it on Google Play Store as well as on Spotify. For more information, you can visit leadwithempower.com. So Joe, Dan, any parting words for the folks out there?
Get after it. It's all about doing it. Don't overanalyze. Don't think about it. Just go.
All in. Like Joe said, get after it. Push the chips into the middle of the table and give it your best. And win, lose, or draw, if you gave it your best, you're getting better as a human being. And that's all we can ask for every day that we wake up. So thanks for checking us out. Really appreciate it. Next episode comes out on Wednesday. Our episodes come out every other Wednesday. And again, like Sarah said, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. You can find us. Check us out. Be well, be safe, and get after it.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for the When Athletes Shit in the Woods podcast. Don't forget to tune in every other Wednesday for more stories, insight, and commentary from sports guys and gals who don't mind a little bit of dirt and grit. Always remember, it's great to have a plan and to go out and get after it with great enthusiasm and passion. However, always remember that the unexpected is just a step away.